Alrighty lads, we are back. Last vid we did was on the Elder Scrolls lore, and that absolutely popped off. In 24 hours we got 1.3k views. So we shall strike it again, this time with my favorite tidbit of lore, the vampire plants of the Elder Scrolls series. Now the thumbnail says their name, the Drinkers. Ooh, spooky. The Drinkers are a species of plants that are produced through rather interesting means. You see, vampirism in the Elder Scrolls is magical in nature, and it can be a blood-borne pathogen, but it is also magically giftable. You don't need to be infected to get it. Here we see that magic in action, and we witness something that I never really thought about till I was playing Oblivion. First, before we begin, let's add some structure to this video. So first we're going to talk about what the plants are. Then we will talk about the meaning behind the creation. And then we will talk about how this is interesting for future lore implications and future instances. So firstly, what are the Drinkers? Well, the Drinkers are just normal plants that a researcher by the name of Amantius Electus decided to create. But how did he do it? Well, he decided to use grave dust, some ash salt, and finally a drop of human blood. He took this mixture and used it as fertilizer for the seeds of his new batch of plants. In return came out these plants that would develop in the dark, they would grow, and a diet that consisted of blood. But worse yet, they gained some sentience. You see, these plants actually had preferences and seemed to trust their caretaker, but be rather ravenous towards anyone else. They displayed emotions of disgust and sadness whenever their caretaker gave them fertilizer, but displayed overjoy enthusiasm when he presented their key source of nutrition, blood. In Amantius's diary, we see that every day the craving for blood exponentially got more needy. First, just a few drops of rat blood. Then it became cats. Then as they started to reach near adulthood, one of them obtained a drop of Amantius's blood. From there, they refused to feast on dog blood and cat blood, so he returned with some of his blood. But then it became vials of his blood. Then he needed nearly a cup of his blood. This would end up killing him if he kept going at this rate. So he bribed a priest at the Temple of the One, who was a medical healer, and she gave him nearly a whole person's worth of blood. To which he fed his plants. They were still not satisfied. And as the dawning realization started to creep up on Amantius, that he had created nothing but a new species of monsters. He, in his extreme fear and guilt over what he had created, over what life he had bestowed to such innocent seeds, he mournfully placed these potted Drinkers on his roof and left them there for a few hours in the day. When he came back, they were gone, just ash and dust. And he seemed rattled by this experience and felt more deterred from ever doing such an experiment ever again. Now let us talk about what exactly was Amantius trying to do here. Well, reading his diary, we don't get much information out of why he chose to do this. But he says, and I quote, "The Empire needs this." Now, for reference, this is set during the game Oblivion, where the Emperor and all of his sons are dead, and the world is being invaded by hell itself. We don't know exactly his intentions. Did he mean to make an army of plants, so we get a game of plants versus demons? Or more likely the case, did he want to create a plant that could thrive in the coming darkness? Let that settle for a bit. It is genius. When hell invades, it permanently destroys the landscape and the sky is left in a permanent darkness, as the rip into the material world causes scars in the sky. So having plants that could thrive in a world without sunlight, that would be great in sustaining the Legion and sustaining the entire empire. It could also be useful for cave dwelling, as these plants would flow as if there was a breeze in the still air. They can grow even in the abysmal depths of the deepest caves. This could allow for new settlements and possibly new ways of culling certain threats. Goblin war tribes, for example, they wage constant skirmishes all the time for food. Well, if these goblin tribes cultivated the vampire plants, then the goblin skirmishes would be stopped, as they would have no reason to fight other than enjoyment. It has many other potentials, and it could have been a great invention, but the obvious hunger that these plants exhibited was too steep. Too much blood was needed in their short lifespan for any empire to really organize and facilitate. Something interesting about these plants, though, is their creation process. For many, vampirism is a blessing from Molag Bal, or a spin-off strain from Clavicus Vile and Cyrodiil. Majority, though, get their vampirism with no real deity strings attached. They just focus on their individual clans or tribes, but these plants come from neither. In fact, they come from just dust of a grave, with a little bit of ash salt and just 1 or 2 drops of human blood. Somehow that magical mixture creates vampirism. So it begs the question, could you rub this mixture onto a human and turn them into a vampire? Could you rub this mixture onto a pregnant woman and end up turning the fetus into a blood-sucking fledgling? The implications are interesting, as we have never seen that in the Elder Scrolls, of people making an alchemical makeup of vampirism. Usually it is bestowed by a god or simple disease that just happens to process you into a vampire. Imagine the chaos one could spread if you poisoned a water supply of a village with vampirism, or dropped this mixture into a general of the Legion into his cup, so as he drinks it, it turns him into a ravenous, blood-sucking vampire. As to which strain of vampirism this causes, we have no idea, but I would guess it is something completely new, as these plants were way too hungry to be normal vampires. Most vampires need a cup of blood or a small sip and they're good for the day. These plants needed buckets of blood just to survive for 1 day alone. So with that, this has been an obscure topic, the drinkers, but that is what I prize myself over on YouTube. I am the guy who will do the most obscure topic in any setting and bring a video about it, so that way all of us can enjoy. If you guys enjoyed this lore splat, please comment down below and subscribe. If you guys want me to cover an equally obscure lore piece, please suggest so below. Something else that I really enjoyed about this is that The Drinkers is a spin of the one movie that I really love, Little Shop of Horrors. Little Shop of Horrors was an amazing movie, and I'm talking mostly about the 1980 ones. The 1950 was still good, but I prefer the 80s just because, well, it was just so silly, especially the main actor was just hysterical. And The Little Shop of Horrors is much the same, where a guy tries his best to feed this plant, but the plant only wants blood. And then as he gives it blood, it goes from a drop to a whole finger to now it needs like a whole body. And the guy just keeps giving and giving and giving. But in this case, this is a guy who stopped giving, who became remorseful over his deeds and said, "What have I done? What have I created?" and decided to get rid of it. Now, what's interesting is that this has been a diary that tells you how to make these creatures, and it's been stolen by the Thieves Guild. To who? No one knows. So someone out there knows a recipe to make the drinkers. And possibly in future Elder Scrolls series, we might see these plants come about. Maybe we'll see someone create a new breed of vampire through this mixture because they didn't want to get bit on the neck and they didn't want to be stuck to a certain deity. But in the process, they may end up something much worse than a normal vampire. As we talked about, the bloodlust was a little bit too much with these plants. So I'm very curious to see what happens later on in other series if they ever do come back to this. Besides that, this has been Freezer 700. I am out. I hope you guys have enjoyed. See you lads next time.